All right. So have you ever felt like cybersecurity is just like this ever-growing maze that you can't escape?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you want to be in the know,
Right,
right? You don't want to be that person who's completely out of the loop,
right.
but at the same time, you don't want to get bogged down in all this crazy technical jargon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, where do you even begin with all this stuff?
So true.
It's so overwhelming. How do we even get a handle on like the essentials, you know?
Well, that feeling is incredibly common, and honestly, that's kind of what we're diving into today.
Okay.
We're going to explore this thing called CYBOK. Have you heard
I
of
guess
it?
CYBOK.
Cybersecurity Body of Knowledge.
Ah, okay. I've heard of that. It sounds kind of like a textbook though.
It does sound like a test, but that's not really what it is.
Okay.
It's more like a blueprint.
Okay.
If you think about like the cybersecurity world, CYBOK is like this structured way of mapping it all out.
A blueprint.
Yeah, and it was really created by a bunch of experts in the field to kind of establish some common ground.
Oh,
Right. Everyone speaking the same language, everyone understanding the fundamentals.
Okay, that makes sense.
So no matter if you're like a tech whiz or you're like setting policy,
Right.
CYBOK can give you that baseline, that shared understanding.
Okay. I like the blueprint analogy that works for me.
Good, good.
So why are we spending time on this blueprint? Like, why is it important
Yeah, good question.
for our listeners? Like, why should they care?
Well, because it's valuable. I mean, think about it. Like you said, you're prepping for a meeting.
Right.
You're trying to get up to speed on what's happening in the world of cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're just curious about staying safe online. Like CYBOK gives you that foundation, no
Right.
matter what your background is.
Okay.
And like we said, it's like a guide. It helps you navigate this complex, crazy world of cybersecurity
Okay. I like that.
without feeling completely overwhelmed.
All right. So who exactly should be listening then? Like, who is this deep dive for?
So if you're someone who needs a solid grasp on like the core concepts of cybersecurity, this is for you.
Okay.
Like we said, you don't need to be a tech person.
Right.
This is for anyone who's curious. So it could be managers who need to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It could be people shifting into cybersecurity roles.
Okay.
And yeah, anyone with a genuine interest in the topic.
Cool. So like a nice wide audience for today's deep dive.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. So our mission today,
Yes.
should you choose to accept it, is to give our listeners that solid understanding of CYBOK.
Absolutely.
Right. And we're gonna touch on the 19 knowledge areas that it encompasses,
Mhm.
and then dive deep into 4 sets of principles that guide how we approach cybersecurity in the first place.
Exactly. Those are the real core concepts we want to focus on.
Got it. All right. So first things first, let's talk about these 19 knowledge areas.
Okay, so CYBOK is divided into 19 distinct knowledge areas.
19, that's a lot.
It is comprehensive.
Okay.
And we call those KAs for short.
Okay.
And each KA represents like a key domain of cybersecurity expertise.
Got it.
So think of them as like the main sections of our blueprint
Okay.
that we talked about earlier.
All right. And I'm assuming they're not just like random topics thrown together.
No, they're actually grouped together logically into categories.
Okay.
And what's really cool is how interconnected they are.
Right.
So, it's not like a bunch of isolated topics, They all relate to each other in some way.
That makes sense.
Like, for example, you take cryptography, right?
Okay.
That's the art of secret communication.
Hmm.
And, that's relevant to like network security.
Okay. Yeah.
Developing secure software. It pops up everywhere.
Got it. It's like a fundamental building block.
Exactly. It's a foundational concept.
Okay, so give me an example then. Like, what kind of topics are we actually talking about with these KAs?
Okay, so they really cover a wide range.
Okay.
You have your more technical areas, like we mentioned, cryptography, network security. That's all about protecting digital infrastructure.
Right.
But then you also have areas like human factors in security,
Interesting.
which is all about how people interact with systems.
Okay.
Because let's be honest, sometimes people are the weakest link.
Oh,
And then you also have legal and ethical considerations, privacy.
oh wow. Whoa.
It's a broad spectrum.
That's a lot to cover.
It is. But don't worry.
Okay.
I'm not going to list all 19 right
I
now.
was going to say.
But this overview is just to give you an idea of how big cybersecurity is,
Okay.
as defined by CYBOK.
So just like a taste.
Right, just a little taste.
Of the breadth of the field.
Exactly. And we'll definitely be exploring specific knowledge areas,
Great.
much more detail in future deep dives.
Okay. Looking forward to those.
Yeah.
But today we're focusing on something even more foundational.
Right.
Like the guiding principles,
Exactly. The underlying principles.
that shape how we think about cybersecurity.
Absolutely. And these are like the bedrock upon which secure systems are built.
Okay.
Regardless of the technology or the threats, they're the recurring themes
Right.
across all those knowledge areas we just talked about.
Got it. So we've got 4 sets of these principles that we're going to unpack today.
We do.
Right.
So first we'll be looking at the Seltzer and Schroeder principles.
Okay.
Those are like the OGs of security principles.
Oh, geez, sir.
They're fundamental to design.
Got it.
Then we'll look at NIST principles.
Okay.
Those guys bring a focus on risk management.
NIST and risk management. Okay.
Exactly. Then we'll discuss latent design conditions.
Latent design conditions.
Yeah, those are like the hidden weaknesses in systems.
Okay. Sneaky.
And finally, we'll touch on the precautionary principle.
Right. Precautionary principle.
Yeah, and how it applies to cybersecurity.
Awesome. Okay. Let's get started.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about these Seltzer and Schroeder principles.
Okay.
So who were these guys and what were their big ideas?
Okay, so David Seltzer and Michael Schroeder, they're pretty much legends in computer security.
Okay.
Back in the 70s.
Okay.
They wrote this super influential paper,
Mm-hmm.
and they laid out 8 key principles
Okay.
for designing secure systems.
Hmm.
And what's crazy is how relevant those principles still are today.
Wow. Decades later.
Yeah, decades later. It's amazing.
Okay. All right. So we've got 8 principles to cover.
We do.
Let's take them one by one.
Okay.
What's the first one?
So the first principle is economy of mechanism.
Economy of mechanism.
And this basically means keep it simple.
Okay.
When you're designing security mechanisms,
Right.
the more complex something is, the more likely it is to have flaws.
Right. More things that can break.
Exactly. More places for bugs to hide.
Makes sense?
So, even the best programmers, they make mistakes.
Right.
And there's a statistic that they introduce a certain number of errors for every 1,000 lines of code.
Wow. Okay.
So you want to keep that trusted computing base, or TC. Yeah, that's like the heart of the system that enforces security. You want to keep that as small and simple as possible.
Okay. So simpler is more secure in this case.
Exactly. Complexity is the enemy of security.
Got it.
The fewer moving parts, the better.
Okay. Next principle.
All right, so the next one is fail-safe defaults.
Fail-safe defaults.
This is all about denying access by default.
Okay.
So unless you're explicitly authorized, you can't get in.
Lockdown.
Lockdown, exactly.
Okay.
So it's a restrictive approach, but it minimizes the chances of unauthorized access.
Right. You're basically assuming that nobody's allowed in.
Right, unless they have explicit permission.
Unless they have the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly.
Okay. So principle number 3.
Number 3 is complete mediation.
Complete mediation. Okay.
This means that every single access to every object in the system has to be checked.
Wow. Every single time.
Every single time.
Okay.
You can't just check once and assume it's good forever.
Right. You're constantly checking.
Constant vigilance. So even if someone manages to get in somehow,
Right.
they can't just move around freely.
They hit a wall.
Exactly. They hit a wall. Every step of the way needs to be verified.
So it's like every door is locked.
Exactly.
Okay. I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, this one's really important for preventing any kind of lateral movement.
Right. If someone gets in, they're stuck.
Exactly.
Okay. So what's number 4?
Number 4 is open design.
Open design.
And this one might seem a little counterintuitive, but it basically says that security shouldn't depend on secrecy.
Okay.
So even if an attacker knows how your system works,
Right.
they still shouldn't be able to break in.
Okay.
The strength of the system should be in the keys, the passwords, the algorithms, not in hiding how it all works.
So you're not relying on security through obscurity.
Exactly. Security through obscurity is a myth.
Okay.
It's like hiding your key under the doormat.
Right. Everyone knows to look there.
Exactly.
You got to have a better system.
You need a strong lock on the door.
Okay. So principle number 5.
All right, number 5 is separation of privilege.
Separation of privilege.
Yeah, this one's all about having multiple layers of defense.
Yeah.
So to access a protected resource, you should need to meet multiple conditions.
Like multi-factor authentication.
Exactly, like multi-factor authentication.
Okay.
So you need your password and that code from your phone,
Right.
or maybe a physical key.
Okay.
The idea is that even if one factor is compromised, the attacker still needs the others.
It's like that vault with multiple locks.
Exactly. It's all about making it as hard as possible for the bad guys.
Okay. So layers upon layers of security.
Exactly. Layers are key.
What's the next principle?
Okay, so principle number 6 is least privilege.
Least privilege. Okay.
This one's closely related to separation of privilege,
Okay.
but it focuses on giving users only the bare minimum access they need.
Okay, so like need-to-know basis.
Exactly, need-to-know basis.
Got it.
So if an application only needs to read a file, it shouldn't be able to edit or delete it.
Make-
This limits the potential damage if something gets compromised.
Right, so you're containing the blast radius.
Exactly. Containment is key.
All right, so principle number 7.
Number 7 is least common mechanism.
Least common mechanism.
Oh, okay.
And this one's all about reducing dependencies between different parts of the system.
Okay, so like minimizing shared components.
Exactly. The fewer things that rely on a single mechanism, the better.
So if one thing breaks, it doesn't bring the whole house down.
Exactly. You don't want a single point of failure.
Okay, so spreading things out, making them more independent.
Right. Isolating things as much as possible.
Got it. Okay. And last but not least, principle number 8.
Number 8 is psychological acceptability.
Psychological acceptability. Okay.
And this one's all about making security user-friendly.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah, because even the best security measures are useless if people don't use them.
Right. If they're too complicated, people will find workarounds.
Exactly. And those workarounds can create new vulnerabilities.
Makes sense. So, remember those crazy password rules? Like uppercase, lowercase numbers, symbols change it every month.
It's like impossible to remember.
Right. And people ended up writing them down on sticky notes.
Oh, yeah, defeating the whole purpose.
Exactly. So the goal is to make security seamless.
Right. It should be built in, not an afterthought.
It should be intuitive, easy to use, and not get in the way of people doing their jobs.
Okay, so psychological acceptability basically means don't make security a pain in the butt.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Awesome. Okay, so those are the Salzer and Schroeder principles.
8 timeless principles.
Still relevant today.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to NIST principles now.
Okay, so NIST, they're all about risk management.
Okay, we hear that term a lot. What's their specific take on it?
Well, one key principle they emphasize is making assumptions explicit.
Interesting.
So when you're assessing risk, you need to be clear about what you believe to be true.
Right, like what are you basing your decisions on?
Exactly. You need to state your assumptions about your systems, the threats you face, your vulnerabilities.
Okay, so transparency is key.
Transparency is crucial.
Got it.
And they also stress the importance of balancing subjective and objective risk.
Okay, so like gut feeling versus actual data.
Right, so your gut feeling might tell you something's risky, but you need to back that up with data.
Evidence-based decisions.
Exactly.
Okay, so once you've assessed the risk, what's next?
Then comes risk management itself.
Oh, okay.
And according to NIST, that's an ongoing process.
Okay, so not a one-time thing.
No, it's continuous. You're always evaluating and adjusting.
Got it.
So you develop and implement different options to address those risks, and you consider your risk tolerance.
Right, like how much risk are you willing to accept?
Exactly. And that varies depending on the organization and the situation.
Okay.
So you're not necessarily aiming to eliminate all risk.
Right, sometimes that's not possible or practical.
Exactly. It's more about making informed decisions about how to manage it.
Okay, so like a calculated risk.
Exactly.
All right, so what about the big picture?
Right.
How do you make sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to risk management?
That's where risk governance comes in.
Risk governance.
It's like the overarching framework
Right.
that ensures everyone in the organization is aware of the risks
Okay.
and understands their role in managing them.
So it's like setting the rules of the game.
Exactly. You need clear policies, procedures, responsibilities,
Right.
and accountability at all levels.
Okay, so it's not just about technology. It's
Yeah.
about people and processes.
Absolutely. It's about creating a culture of security.
Got it.
And CYBOK actually has this really helpful diagram,
Yeah.
figure 2.3, I think it is,
Okay.
that contrasts a component-driven approach,
Okay.
which is all about securing individual assets,
Right.
with a system-driven approach, which is more holistic.
Okay, so like a zoomed out view.
Exactly. And NIST guidance helps organizations figure out which approach works best for them.
Okay, cool. So NIST is all about that big picture risk management.
Exactly.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit now
Okay.
and talk about these latent design conditions.
All right.
These hidden weaknesses you mentioned.
Yes. So latent design conditions are like flaws that are built into the system.
Okay.
They're not always obvious.
Right, they're hidden.
Yeah, they're like ticking time bombs.
Yeah.
And they can stay dormant for a long time until something triggers them.
So like a vulnerability that's just waiting to be exploited.
Exactly. And a good way to visualize this is with the Swiss cheese model.
The Swiss cheese model.
Yeah, CYBOK actually has a diagram of it.
Okay.
Figure 4.2.
Figure 4.2. Okay.
It basically shows how these different layers of defense can have holes.
Right.
And if those holes line up,
Oh.
that's when a threat can slip through.
So it's like multiple things have to go wrong
Exactly.
at the same time for a major failure to happen.
Right. It's a chain of events.
Okay, so what are some examples of these latent conditions?
So, it could be something like insecure default configurations
Right.
that never get updated.
Okay, or it could be a poorly designed user interface
Mm-hmm.
that leads to user errors.
Okay, so like if the system's confusing, people are more likely to make mistakes.
Exactly, and those mistakes can expose those hidden weaknesses.
Got it.
So it's not just about defending against external threats, it's also about fixing those internal flaws.
Right, like shoring up your defenses from the inside out.
Exactly.
Okay. And what's important to keep in mind when dealing with these latent conditions?
Well, one crucial point is that security measures shouldn't create more work for users.
Right. You don't want to make things too complicated.
Exactly, because if security is too cumbersome, people will try to bypass it,
Right.
and that can actually make things less secure.
They'll find a workaround.
Exactly, and that workaround might create a new vulnerability. So the goal should be to design systems that are secure by default.
Okay, so like security is built in from the ground up.
Exactly. You don't want users to have to constantly make security decisions.
Right? It should just work.
It should just work seamlessly. All right, so last principle we're going to cover today is the precautionary principle.
Yes.
And I've heard of this before, but how does it apply to cybersecurity?
So the precautionary principle basically says that you should take action to prevent harm,
Okay.
even if you don't have conclusive evidence that harm is going to happen.
So like err on the side of caution.
Exactly. Err on the side of caution.
Okay.
So if there's a credible possibility of something bad happening, you
Mhm.
take steps to mitigate it,
Even if you're not 100% sure.
even if you're not 100% sure.
Okay, so this is like a better safe than sorry approach.
Exactly. Better safe than sorry.
Got it.
Especially when it comes to emerging threats
Right.
or new technologies that we don't fully understand.
So like if you're not sure what the risks are, it's better to be cautious.
Exactly. You don't want to wait until it's too late.
Right.
You want to be proactive, not reactive.
Okay, so that's the precautionary principle in a nutshell.
It is.
All right, so we've covered 4 sets of principles today.
We have.
The Salzer and Schroeder principles for secure design,
Yes.
NIST principles for risk management,
Right.
understanding latent design conditions to prevent those hidden weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. And the precautionary principle for taking that proactive approach.
Right, and those really provide a strong foundation for thinking about cybersecurity.
Absolutely. They're fundamental insights.
And they're not tied to any specific technology or threat.
Exactly. They're timeless principles.
So anyone listening can apply these principles to their own lives,
Absolutely.
whether it's at work or just browsing the internet.
Right.
Being aware of these principles can help you make more informed decisions.
Yeah, it's all about being security conscious.
Exactly.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg when
Right.
it comes to CYBOK.
So today we've laid the groundwork.
We have.
We talked about the structure of CYBOK
Mm-hmm.
and these core principles.
Yes.
But in future deep dives, we'll be exploring those 19 knowledge areas in much more detail.
Awesome. So we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty.
We'll be getting into the specifics of like
Okay.
cryptography and network security and all that good stuff.
Exactly. We'll cover it all.
So make sure you stay tuned for those.
Yeah, we've got a lot more to explore.
But for now, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay.
Think about how these principles resonate with you in your own work, your online life.
Right.
Which one struck you as most important or surprising?
Yeah, that's a great question to reflect on.
And as a final thought, I want to ask our listeners this.
Okay.
Cybersecurity is constantly changing.
Right. Oh, yeah, it's a moving target.
New threats popping up all the time.
Every day.
But these principles, they remain pretty constant.
They do. They're foundational.
So which one do you think will be most challenged in the future?
That's a good one.
Or maybe which one will prove to be the most critical?
It's something to think about.
Yeah, food for thought.